Going once, going twice, sold! You're listening to The Property Pod, an accessible and easy way to get into or help understand the goings-on of the property market. Join Aaron, John and Pat as they discuss all things real estate, most likely get sidetracked, and then try and rein it all back in as they present The Property Pod.
All right. Welcome back to the Property Pod, your easy to listen to, totally free and accessible way into the property market. My name's Aaron Horn. I am your host, and I'm joined by the team again, Johnny Mack and Paddy Berry.
All right.
Wowzers, that's a whole lot of noise coming at me right there. Let's hope our levels aren't too high.
Yeah.
What's on for today? I've been very bad at organising, and I haven't. I've been a busy boy, so I haven't been on board for the Property Pod this week. What are we doing?
Well, to pre-frame it and just so everyone's aware, this is going to be a bit of a dense episode. Was one of the
dense.
Well, one of the local conveyancers, Helen Kent from Laurie Kent Conveyancing. So we were chatting, and she said one of the common ones that people don't understand is the concept of title insurance.
I have no idea what you're already talking about.
Exactly.
And like if you're going to write a book and you want to take out insurance that no one steals your title.
Really close. Really close.
And the perfect topic for our podcast.
John's written a book, haven't you?
Yeah, don't give it away.
Amazon
Don't give it away.
bestseller, John?
Not exactly.
But did you insure your title?
No, I didn't. And from what I understand, someone bought the web address after I think I was chatting in a forum once, and then it was like, "You bastard!"
So there you go. You should have taken out insurance.
I want to see where's that website going.
Sweet. Well, that's the end of the episode. We've worked it out. Thanks, guys.
Anyway, so title insurance, you can, from what I understand, you can purchase it at any time of the ownership of your property.
Yep.
But what it'll do is insure you against any.
It's a raunchy website, John.
Don't give it away.
Yeah, I'd be nervous
up on the computer at work.
I'd be nervous typing that in. We won't be adding it to the show notes.
Yeah, I missed my opportunity on that one. I couldn't use it to sell the book, so I just created a different website instead. So in the elements that you imagine, I'm sure people have had circumstances where they've gone to build a new fence and then there was a boundary adjustment that was required, or there's issues related to unapproved works. Like this title insurance covers a huge gambit of problems, and it's really, really unknown. So when Helen and I were talking about it, we thought it'd actually be a really good subject because it relates to anyone who has their name written against the title. So if you own a property, this is something you need to hear, something really, really worth considering.
Almost if you're buying a property too, you need to hear by the sound of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And,
Guys, I bought a property and no one mentioned this to me.
Okay, well, there you go.
You should listen to the podcast. It's easy and accessible.
Yep.
And free.
Yeah, and that's the thing that Helen and I had mentioned, like say it to our clients all the time. And we actually, I know in our office we've made it a policy to make people aware of it and speak to the lawyer about it because we can't give advice, obviously. But Helen introduced me to Paul, who we're getting on this morning.
Yep.
And he's going to talk all things about title insurance. Now, that's the thing. Unfortunately, like I said, insurance is a dense subject, but it's something that's worth listening to.
Well, Aaron and I are pretty basic on this type of info, so we're going to let you
I reckon you won't hear my voice for the rest of the show.
As in, I might just go get a coffee and you and Paul have a chat, all right?
Yeah, got it.
We'll try and jump in when we can.
Yeah, so anyway, with that pre-frame, topic, I think it's really important.
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good. Let's get him on.
Yeah, let's get Paul on the line.
Cool.
414 Real Estate has been operating within the northern suburbs of Hobart since 2006. With their innovative approach to marketing and managing your property, they have all your property needs covered. Find out more by visiting them today at 414.com.au.
We actually have Paul Watkins from Stewart Title. So thanks for joining us this morning, Paul.
No, thanks for the invite. It's great to be here.
Yeah, don't spill. Like as we always like to do with all our guests, Paul, could you just tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got into title insurance?
Yeah, sure, John. So my name is Paul Watkins. I'm the General Counsel at Stewart Title. So in that role, I sort of look after the legal, underwriting and policy and claims side of the business. So one aspect of my job really is to do exactly what we're doing this morning, and that's explain exactly what title insurance is. So my background is I'm a property lawyer. So I was first admitted to practice nearly 20 years ago. But for the last sort of 14 years, I've been at Stewart because it's very much, title insurance is very much a property law related product. And so that's that's really where I've found that the legal skills that you get really come into play.
Well, because so with that then, what fundamentally, what is title insurance?
I'm glad you asked that because I've got no idea, John.
Start from the top, Paul.
Absolutely. Don't worry. Don't feel bad. I had the same question 15 years ago when I first heard about it as well. What is this thing?
Yeah.
So look, fundamentally, title insurance is a form of insurance that people can buy when they purchase a property, and it covers them for risks associated with purchasing the property, such as previous illegal building works that a previous owner may have put on the property without getting approval.
Okay.
It covers them for boundary encroachments if the physical fence boundaries don't match the legal boundaries. Mm-hmm. It means that someone can buy a property where, a fence or even a structure which appears to be, fenced within their land is in fact encroaching on the neighbour and the neighbour finds out about it. It covers things like non-compliance with a development consent or a subdivision consent. So when property is developed and subdivided, 20 years ago, the relevant authority might have imposed an obligation on the developer to register a drainage easement or a right of way in favour of another property owner, and that developer may not have complied with that provision at the time, and that issue could lay just dormant for many, many years, and no one realises it until something happens and all of a sudden, the relevant people become aware of it. And all of a sudden, the new owner of the property is in the hot seat for complying with that provision that might be outstanding for many, many years. So it's really a policy of insurance that covers you for risks associated with non-compliance with all of the zoning, building regulations, planning regulations, subdivision regulations, all of the laws and regulations that now are imposed on the ownership of property. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the areas of insurance that, like you said, people need to be made more aware of, because when people think insurance and people think buying property, they're very much focused on, home contents insurance. What if the house burns down? What if there's a hailstorm? Something like that. But the sort of risks I'm talking about are probably on par in terms of, potential loss.
So, Paul, Patrick here. Just a quick question. With title insurance, how long does a policy last for? Like, you get house contents, it's a 12-month period that you pay for. Is it just for the transfer period of time, or does it go for a certain length of time after you take ownership, or the life that you own the property, or what's the length of a policy?
Yeah, so it's the life of your ownership of the property.
Okay.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, so title insurance is different from, say, home contents insurance, where home contents insurance is insuring you for kind of future events that might happen within a certain time period. That's why you insure, 12 months at a time. You get to that 12 months, nothing happened. Oh, sure, the next 12 months, so on and so forth. Title insurance is different because what we're really insuring you for is, for an issue that is already there in your property. It's lurking beneath the surface. And so, it might be discovered at some time during your ownership of the property. And so you basically buy the policy at the time that you purchase the property on settlement. You pay the premium once on settlement, and then you're insured for the life of your ownership of the property, whether that's 5 years, 7 years, or 30 years. You don't have to renew the premium every year. It's just a one-off payment.
And that covers you or as long as your name's written against that title.
That's absolutely right. And so when you look at that concept, obviously it represents good value because a lot of the issues actually come to light, and we can talk about this when we talk about some of the claim scenarios. But a lot of issues actually come to light not when you buy the property, but when you maybe sell it 5 or 6 years later. And then all of a sudden things that you unbeknownst to you that you kind of inherited, but it wasn't discovered at the time, might then get discovered 5 or 6 or 7 years later when you decide to sell. So even if you've signed a contract to sell the property, you're still the owner. And so if during that sale process all of a sudden these issues come to light, then you're covered during that sale process as well.
Well, I know in Tasmania we've got that as part of the transfer. They've got the request for the search, the 337 certificate, which is correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but that's there to help bring up a lot of these issues. But in what you're saying there is that sometimes there are ones, like you said, that lay dormant, and you could have 3 changes of ownership. But then it's not until, like you said, 20 years later where a problem occurs, and now it's just whoever's owning that property at the time has to deal with it. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like Russian roulette, because the 337 certificate is a great tool. It's an information certificate, but when you're dealing with things like unapproved building work, unapproved building work by definition is work that's carried out to a property without council's knowledge. So no permits are applied for in circumstances where they should have been.
Right. And
so the 337 certificate is not going to help you in that. What that might do is show that there might have been a permit originally for the original dwelling, back in 1984 or something.
Yeah.
That's all the information that you really get. But between 1984 and when you apply for the 337 certificate, there might have been substantial changes, renovations, additions, extensions to that property where a building permit was required and not obtained. And so that won't be discoverable using a 337.
Yeah.
The other big problem, not only in Tassie but all over Australia, is you've got this issue where for many, many years, record keeping, could be described as somewhat lax by some councils.
I think
their appetite.
That's a kinder way of putting it.
Well, I'm trying to be diplomatic, but and so you sort of had this period, where for many, many years, record keeping wasn't exactly on the top of the agenda. A lot of people did a lot of works. We've also seen in Australia the rise of the do-it-yourself renovating craze, driven by shows like The Block, House Rules. It's really part of our sort of Australian culture now. It's this concept of have a go and
have a crack
at yourself. Have a crack yourself.
Yeah.
Who needs licensed trades?
That's right. Yeah. You look at, and that's where some of these sort of do-it-yourself shows can be misleading. People sitting at home watching them, because what those shows don't make very clear is that whilst all these, amateurs are off sort of gutting this house back to its bare shell and then rebuilding it into like the Taj Mahal. And it looks like they're doing it all themselves over a weekend, when in fact there's probably an army of tradies, outside of camera. There's probably been 6 months of pre-planning approval, for the properties.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make good television. So people just sit back and go, oh, wow, these two people, one of them's a hairdresser, but one of them, owns a dairy farm or something. And look, they've bought this old house and they've absolutely gutted it and rebuilt it and extended it and changed it all themselves to these immaculate standards. So you've kind of got this perfect storm brewing where you've got this sort of inclination for people to sort of have a go at putting that deck on or that extension or enclosing that pergola into a family room.
I can't believe The Block hasn't done a spin-off show, the planning stage. Just sitting around a room with paperwork. Got to fill out the Form 35 and get it to council by 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
Steve's coming back for the door. Is he going to sign off on it?
It would make really gripping television, wouldn't it? So it's the boring side of property development that no one wants you to see, and so you've got that going on. But then what we're seeing is that all of a sudden councils, I think, have suddenly gone, oh wow, we've actually got a bit of a obligation to regulate the way that properties are being improved. There's this thing in Tasmania called the Building Act. Local councils have got enforcement powers under that. And so it's kind of like what we're seeing is that more and more councils are now, their appetite for enforcement is much higher. But then it's in conjunction with a history or decades of sort of not great record keeping and a lot of do-it-yourself renovation. So it is presenting itself as a significant risk for people, just in the unapproved building work aspect. the boundary issues as well, which are another matter.
Well, it might be a good thing to lead into a couple of things then, Paul. Like, first off, who should get it? Because obviously, there's different points of ownership, you could say. And then, and secondly, if you could give us some good, even some real world examples of how claims you've assisted people with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody looking to buy residential or commercial property would want to consider title insurance. But not only that, but also people who are already the owner of their property. So, because title insurance is not as widely known about as we would like, a lot of people buy property and they miss the opportunity to be insured at that time.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that title insurance ship has sailed, because we do have an existing owner policy that you can take out. It covers you for the same risks, but you can take it out now as the owner. Other people would be property investors, in particular people who are buying property not to live in as their home, but as part of an investment portfolio, particularly self-funded retirees, superannuation properties where you don't want any sort of contingent liability hanging around over your head. I mean, you don't want to buy an investment property and then put it to work, and then all of a sudden, you get building notice issued by the council because they've just discovered after 15 years that, part of the house was never approved, and you're now looking at a demolition order, for example.
Yeah, you'd just be sitting there going, "Oh, that's a shame."
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Because when you've got to deal with that in terms of the financial imposition, it's really no different to damage claim. Like you're talking tens of thousands of dollars to try and bring properties that have been improved or extended without permits into compliance with the building regulations as they exist today.
Well, I suppose, that's interesting, isn't it? So, like, when you go into the examples of claims, there'll be ones from just the mere fact of readjusting a fence line to, in those development situations to, tens upon thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. So in Tasmania, the claims portfolio very similar to the rest of Australia. So really the highest source of claims that we see are unapproved building work claims. So we're dealing with councils issuing building notices on a frequent basis in relation to properties that may have been that way or been in existence for decades.
Yep.
It's just that council are now just realising it and now enforcing it. The second highest source of claims in Tasmania are, as you say, boundary discrepancies. And they can be across the whole spectrum of properties. I mean, we've seen boundary claims in suburban Hobart, where you've got fences that were simply never put on the legal boundary. When the fences were first erected, they had no regard to existing survey pegs, or the survey pegs were gone, and they just put the fence where they thought the boundary was, and that ends up in a dispute, between our insured and the neighbour.
Oh, sorry, Paul. This sounds really similar to something I was dealing with a friend recently. They have a block of land, and they were getting the surveyor to come and pop all the pegs in, and they contacted the neighbour to say, we want to put a fence on. Can we arrange to pay either side of it? And she's like, "Oh, yes, I was actually up there. I saw that the pegs were put in the wrong spot, so I got there and moved them."
Yes.
And they were like, "Oh, okay, we'll have to get back to you on that one." And then they got into this sticky situation of what do we do? Who do we talk to? And back then I would never have thought of title insurance as being a thing, but now I would have been like, "Oh, I know just the people to pass you on to." That's something that you're kind of describing here?
Yeah, well, what the consequence of that really is that the beginning process of putting boundary fences in is pegging out the boundaries of the property.
Yep.
Because they're established in accordance with a title plan. But if that initial process goes wrong, I mean, and we've seen developments all across Australia where the surveyors come in, put their bright little shiny yellow pegs in, and then kids come home from school and nick them all. It's like a game. Yeah, woohoo! Or even in the development process, you've got excavators and graders and all these heavy machinery running around.
Knock them out.
And so the fences just go down. It's a bit of a sort of that'll do. It's close enough. And it doesn't really become an issue until it becomes an issue. And that could be because, suddenly somebody wants to build a granny flat or a shed or something. And then from a council point of view, they say, okay, well, it has to be a certain distance from the boundary and things like that. That requires someone to survey that boundary. And then that's when it gets uncovered and it becomes a problem.
Well, the thing is too, is 30 centimetres is a lot of room when it comes to getting approvals for those kind of outbuildings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The incorrect location of that fence can not only stop you from doing what you want to do, but it also then puts you on notice, or puts your neighbour on notice, more importantly, that the fence is in the wrong spot. And they're actually losing the right to use some of their backyard. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, the next step is a letter to say, "Hey, your fence is encroaching on my land by a certain amount. I want you to move that fence."
Yeah, I guess in this scenario I've brought up, if the person hadn't have said anything, they may not have even known. They'd be like, "Oh, yeah, the surveyor did a great job," but then later down the line.
And that's the problem. That's the risk that we have. And we see that with even vacant land properties that are fenced, suburban properties. We've had boundary problem issues in more rural parts of Tassie. Lately, we've seen a lot of properties that are on acreage. And there's a few claims now where the boundaries of the property have always been looked at just in terms of where the fences are. But then they've now discovered that those fences are way into Crown land that might be adjoining.
Oh, right.
And then the surveyors have now discovered that, oh, hang on, a good chunk of that sort of paddock that you thought was yours is in fact Crown land. And we've had situations and claims where, in the intervening years, people have put big sheds up. Now all of a sudden they've discovered that half of the shed, and we're talking big, sort of industrial type sheds, not a little thing that just houses the lawnmower. Half of that's actually located on Crown land.
Oh, Jesus.
And for whatever reason, and but surprisingly, they're not, and so you're kind of like, well, this has to be rectified, and it's like, well, what do you do? And it's a problem because it's a problem that has been inherited by the new owner.
Yes.
They're not the ones that built the shed 15 years ago. They're just now the ones that have to deal with the problem. And that's really, that's really the value of the insurance. Yeah, there's a lot of those sorts of issues around in Tassie simply because, as I said earlier, back in the good old days, people bought a property and they could pretty much do what they want with it. They can build what they want on it. But those days are very much over now, not just in Tassie, but all over Australia. It's just so highly regulated with planning and zoning and building regulations that, it's a fairly tight rope that you walk when you use land these days. So
absolutely.
That's really the value of the title insurance.
So, Paul, a lot of these examples that you're providing, they sound quite intense to rectify, and obviously a fair bit of work goes into fixing them. What does that mean from a cost perspective if I want to take out title insurance? That's right. I mean, some of the claims can vary from a few $1,000s to tens of thousands of dollars. It sounds like you're bleeding money.
Yeah, there can be that element. There's also an element of defence. So the policy itself, unlike other insurance policies where they're just fixing damage, for example, includes a component where the insurance company has to defend you legally. So you might have a claim, for example, where the neighbour suddenly claims to have a right of way over your property. You buy the property, you move in, you walk out the backyard, and then all these people are walking through your back fence. And you say to them, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, yeah, I've got this right." Didn't the previous owner tell you about this? So we would then look at that issue from a legal point of view, and we would appoint and have appointed local practitioners in Tassie to give advice and then effectively act on behalf of our insured by reviewing, that right-of-way issue, forming a view that no, in fact, there's no legal right-of-way that might benefit these neighbours. These neighbours are in error. And then, we would write through our lawyers a letter to the neighbour to say, look, stop accessing this property. You actually have no legal right to do that. That would be get off my land. Yeah, I mean,
Aaron's got his shotgun.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, any repeat offences will be met with a double barrel or something like that. So it's a legal defence cost as well. So there can be quite a spectrum of what it costs. There's often a building cost. So, for example, if you've got an illegal extension that needs to be rectified to bring it into compliance, then we'd pay the cost of that. Sometimes things can't be kept; they just don't comply. You have to remove them. So the policy would pay the cost of removing that structure for the demolition cost, but then the policy would respond by compensating the insured for the loss in value to the property as a result of that structure being removed.
So just you pull that little bit of pull that piece of string and it just compounds. You don't know how far it's going to go, depending upon what you need.
That's right. I mean, with a legal building work cover, our liability is capped at $160,000. So that liability has that cap on it, but that's a pretty good cap. We've never had a claim in Tasmania, for example, where the costs of complying or dealing with an unapproved building work claim would come anywhere near that. But for other aspects of the policy, basically the policy amount, so the maximum amount of cover is effectively the purchase price of the property. That's the policy amount, is what you paid for it.
Yeah, gotcha. And then so how, I mean, you don't have to, we're not locking into numbers, but I mean, on average, what's a policy going to cost someone to purchase?
Yeah, so the way title insurance premiums work, it's based on the value of the property.
Right.
So there's basically a scale. So, if your property is under $500,000, $500,000 or less, then your total premium is going to be around about $440.
Yeah, right.
As a one-off payment, which you don't have to pay each year. It's just a one-off, and you're insured forever. And there's no excess payable on any claim. So when you do make a claim, or if you do have to make a claim, it's not like you've got to pay the first $5,000 or something. There's no excess at all.
Yeah, as a percentage, it's almost negligible of the value.
Well, that's right, exactly, and it's also relative to some other costs. So, for example, a lot of conveyancers and solicitors will advise their clients and people buying property to survey the land, for example. Get an identification survey to identify these boundary issues. So a lot of people don't do that. I know in Tassie, it's the same in the rest of Australia. It's a cost that most purchasers don't want to take on, and so. I don't know what the average cost of a boundary survey might be around Hobart, but say in Sydney, it's probably between say $800 to $2,000.
Yeah,
would be $1,200, maybe $1,000. So a lot of people are reluctant to spend that kind of money for that purpose, but. If they're not getting that survey, or the next best thing at least is to insure against that risk. And so the premium is actually, compared to the cost of that, is actually probably half or sometimes a quarter of the amount.
Yeah.
So can you get that as an alternate to getting the survey, for example, and then you're kind of covered across the life of
right.
And more as well.
Yep. And that's how a lot of solicitors and conveyancers say, look, in terms of this boundary risk, a couple of options you can survey the property yourself, or if you don't want to do that, you can at least insure against that risk.
I know in our office we've still got the long tape that you can pretty much wrap around. It's nearly 100 metres long, and many years ago they'd be walking the fence line with the agent, going, "Oh, that's 25 and that's 27." It's like, mate, just don't even try. Just take out the insurance.
Throw out the tape, Johnny.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I guess the difference is. We could spend hours talking about it, but the other issue is in terms of the market. How much time does someone have to do all that? And if a contract has already been signed, well, what's it actually going to do for you anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Once you sign a contract, you can go off and do these things, and then you get your big tape measure out and say, "Oh, I don't know, it's not quite adding up," and you write to the vendor and say, "Oh, look, we've signed this contract. We're settling in 14 days, and we just can't quite work out the dimensions of this property." I mean, they're not going to be overly interested.
Well,
at the end of the day,
And then you get an email back. Are you a surveyor? Question mark.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well,
so, what can you do about it anyway? In any event, so that's where insurance is good, because insurance is all about a remedy.
Yeah.
We deal with the consequences, and what we're seeing too in Tassie is more kind of mainlanders moving down. And bringing their, particularly when the Sydney siders are moving to Tassie, and they're bringing their kind of pugilistic approach to neighbourly relations with them, So, we see in Sydney in particular, people will, fight to the death over, half a square metre of land.
Because the value of it's so high too.
That's right, and so that's the mindset, and a lot of those people are now moving. And picking up, buying a house and moving to Tassie for all the great reasons that people move to Tassie, and then they suddenly find that their fence is or their neighbour's fence is half a metre into their property, and they go to war over it. So it's we're seeing more and more of that.
Look, Paul.
Yeah.
We're conscious of time now, mate.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Mate, but thanks so much for taking the time to explain that. And I think that's sort of one thing that we've been starting to advise our clients, that when we were first introduced to this quite a number of years ago, we just took out policies on our properties straight away. Because, again, like you said, it's that problem that these issues are lying dormant, that no one knows that it's an issue until it becomes one, and that could be 6 months or 6 years or 60 years down the track.
It's like a cold case.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you just imagine even the case where families have inherited properties over multiple generations and they're large acreages, they get cut off and changed, and then all of a sudden it becomes someone else's problem. And I guess rather than getting out the tape and trying to figure it out yourself, just grab a title insurance policy and be done with it.
Well, some of the rural blocks that I saw, John, we don't even know where the boundaries are. We're just like, they're over there somewhere, and people are like, okay.
Yeah, that'll do.
So I can see real advantages in a policy like that for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But Paul,
because some of the boundary descriptions can be quite, it's from the old tree to the hedge and to the corner of the creek, that's the southern boundary. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, see that tree? That's it. That's the corner.
Roughly around there.
Yeah, roughly around there. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Paul. Well, where can people find you, by the way?
So I mean, our website has mountains of information. So it's www.stewart, WARTAU.com. Yep. For some reason, we've decided to do the AU.com rather than .com.au. Okay. But there's a lot of information there. We've got consumer guides, there's videos on the site that go into claims examples, and there's contact details there if anyone wants to reach out and contact us directly as well.
Awesome. All right, Paul, look, thanks again, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all. No, it's great to be here. Thanks very much for the invite. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
As a family-run business, First National Real Estate McGregor understands that the property market can be stressful. However, with a strong team in both sales and rentals, we are here to guide you through the property maze. Find out more today at mcgregorfm.com.
All right, John, that was Paul Watkins from, what did you say, Stewart Title.
Yeah.
Tell you what, I'm feeling like half of what he was describing, I had no idea were problems that I should be concerned about.
Yeah, I learned a heap in that as well. And we'd had the different companies come into our office before, but they've shown some nightmare scenarios that, like Paul said, that cover was up to $160,000. That goes to show the scale in which this stuff can escalate really quick.
Well, the thing that got me was he said that could be $800 to $2,000 for just the measuring tape or whatever.
For surveyor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or you could just
$500,
$400, depending on how much the property costs, and then it's covered.
Yeah, exactly. If anything ever goes wrong, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for.
So it looks like you're going to have to throw out that long measuring tape.
I still like it. Although the handle's broken, so it's a pain in the butt to use.
What else have you been measuring, John?
Don't give it away.
Oh, that's a callback. Yeah, that's a callback to your book. On the side, it's just a big measurement.
And what a way to finish
What a
this
way.
week.
Oh, yeah, we can't top that. Well,
Well, I guess that's thanks for listening.
Yeah,
yes, thanks for listening. But I've been listening to lots of podcasts, and I forget that at the end you meant to say that stuff where you suck up to everyone, like, subscribe, share it with your friends, get it out there.
Oh, thanks for all our followers that currently follow.
Yep.
Yes, and news, boys.
Talking to you, Aaron's mum.
Oh, she'll like that. News is, I think I've lined up a really good guest. I've actually been describing him as the James Bond of plants to people.
James
Oh,
Bond of
yeah.
plants.
I just said he's like the sharpest looking botanist or landscaper that you've
And
ever
I've been
met.
following on Facebook and Instagram, and he's just been traveling around Europe, and bloody hell, it's like
Yes.
he is Bond.
So, yeah. Oh, maybe he was solving some botany problems over there. Anyway, spring is coming around the corner, so I have lined up someone that's going to help us throughout spring.
Yeah, awesome.
And he's going to put us all to shame. Like, wear all your fur coats, get your goblets out, because even with all that stuff on, we're still going to be the ugliest people in the room. And he's a long-time listener, so he'll know what we're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right, guys.
Awesome.
Like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff, and look forward to hearing Bond in the upcoming weeks.
Cool. Till next time.
Boom.
See you. And now for a legal disclaimer. You have been listening to The Property Pod, produced and edited by 414 Media House in conjunction with 414 Real Estate and McGregor First National Propriety Limited.
This podcast is general information only, and the thoughts and views expressed is the opinion of our panel, and listeners should always seek and use their own investigation into any topic we discuss to ensure they fully understand their own situation.
It does not constitute and should not be relied on as purchasing, selling, financial or investment advice or recommendations, express or implied, and it should not be used as an invitation to take up any agent or investment services. No investment decision or activity should be undertaken on the basis